Hello there, lads and ladies. Welcome back to another tattoo story time. It's been a way too long since our last story time. And today I want to talk about a very special tattoo that's close to my heart. Well, I should say close to my hand. It's my little angel that I did in honor of my grandmother, who is still alive. She's 102 years old, at least by this year now, which is absolutely fantastic. Like how she's able to make the 100 mark is incredible in our minds. She's always been a healthy young lady. She's roughly about 4'5", so quite small, bless her, but she gets around town an awful lot. She's kind of slowed down a little bit now, especially after a recent hernia surgery she had to go through, unfortunately, which kind of worried us because it was during the COVID pandemic time. Well, not like right in the middle of it, but it was like 6 or so months afterwards. So we had to like take an awful lot of precautions with her before we had her go into the hospital just to make sure that she wasn't going to get infected or anything like that. She's also double jabbed, so you know how she worries about stuff like that. She's a bit of a worrywart, bless her up, but yeah, she's okay. She's fine. She's as healthy as they can be, really. She's as strong as an ox, really. The only issue we had with her, actually, was some medicine didn't really go well with her. I kind of made the unsavory joke of calling her Yoda because her face kind of like blew up and her ears kind of stretched outwards, kind of like the way Yoda's ears were shaped, basically. It's still awful, but it makes my mum laugh every time we talk about it. Stretched ears I have. But yeah, she's a good sport about it, bless her, and she's healthy now. That's all that really matters. But yeah, the tattoo that I got is an angel because it was a little pendant that my grandmother gave me about 10 years back or so. And then 5 years later, I thought, I kind of want to give back to my grandmother. So I thought, why not get a tattoo of the angel that she gave me for my 20th birthday? And then, I don't know, was it 20th? 2000? I believe I was, I can't quite remember how old I was when she gave me that, but the interesting thing with it is that I wanted to kind of immortalize it, really, because she is an avid writer and she has beautiful calligraphy. Unfortunately, her writing has kind of like decreased over the years, which is a shame, really, because my uncle and my mother have beautiful handwriting, whilst I have not got the same skills, unfortunately. I feel like that my hand writing is probably as bad as a 2-year-old's. I'm not joking, my handwriting is awful. You can still read it, it's still legible, but it's just terrible. I don't want to show you because I don't want to embarrass myself. That's probably the one thing that I'm embarrassed about myself is my handwriting because it is just childlike, really. Like if I was gonna like write a CV out, people would have probably might have found it like touching that I had like maybe a nephew or a niece write it out for me. It's kind of like that Friends gag, really, where Joey basically writes up a recommendation letter for Chandler and Monica about adopting a child, basically. How like he writes about how they're lovely people and all that. And they kind of thought Joey was a child based on the handwriting and based on his drawings as well. Don't worry, I don't draw when I write. Honestly, my drawings are just as bad. You know, think of stick figures without heads. It's not very good. So anyway, the story I wanted to tell about the little angel was because of my grandmother, and the story behind it was kind of interesting. I wanted to get it on my palm because I wanted to kind of show my grandmother a little bit of like life's pains that I wanted to go through alongside it because she'd gone through a world war, she'd lost her husband to a blood clot due to an unfortunate accident. Yeah, my grandfather and my great grandfather survived the war, but my grandfather ended up dying of a blood clot that went from his leg up to his heart, unfortunately, because they couldn't catch it in time because of the car accident. And my great grandfather, I believe, just died of similar circumstances when it came to a heart attack, basically. No car involved, just a heart attack. It's still upsetting, really, nonetheless, really. And she'd gone most of her life without ever finding someone else, basically. She found her loved one and basically just didn't want to remarry again after that, which is understandable, you know, because I feel like if you spent most of your life with someone, then it kind of becomes the simpler thing to just hold on to that memory of the one that you love, basically. And it's a shame that most relationships aren't like that now these days, really. My grandmother is kind of eccentric a little bit sometimes, and she can be a bit me, but you know, I don't really blame her. Like, imagine living 102 years and just like trying to find another reason to be alive, really. Because I feel like if you've been on this world long enough, you've seen an awful lot of horrors. Not that she's seen horrors and all that. I mean, she's been through a world war, but it's not like she was on the front lines or anything. But it's still not pleasant to like live through the Blitz and stuff like that. It's not very enjoyable for anyone really to imagine something like that. But she's kind of her own little world, you know. She doesn't really take to new things. She's kind of stuck in her old ways when it comes to like you know, how she used to live the simple life of a housewife, basically, which is kind of a shame, really, because I feel like she's missing out on an awful lot of things with the family. And I don't blame her, because in her age, like, you'd be like, oh, like who cares? I just want to like live out my days, basically, in somewhat peace and alone, which is understandable. But yeah, I wanted to get the tattoo because I wanted to kind of immortalize the same sort of pain that she kind of lived through throughout her 100 years of life, basically. And I thought I'd get it on the palm because it was one of the most gruesome places to get it. I tell you now, I think the back of my leg and oh, there was another position that I didn't like. This was easily the most painful. Don't get me wrong, but I think the back of my leg, because of how long it took for me to have it done for 6 hours, whilst this was only about 40 minutes. But this was just so much because of all the veins, basically. Oh yeah, this one here, like this little bit here, this little bit of hair could not be coloured in because I could not stand the pain of the wrist. Like, there are so many veins and capillaries there that when she touched it, I was like, you're gonna have to do the outlining because I cannot like even like getting that little bit like smidged in. She'd had to go really deep because for the yellow hair of the character there, it just wouldn't take. And it was the same with this one as well, because with this one, purple kind of like really had to get sunk in for it to stay there and for it to hold, basically. And it was the same with yellow because yellow fades quickly. I've had these two tattoos for about roughly 4 or so years, whilst this one I've had for about 7, coming up to 7, because I got this back in 2015, just before I went to Japan. And that was the interesting thing as well. I wanted to talk about Japan because I went to Japan for a 17 long hour flight. We went all the way from Gatwick to Narita, and then once we landed, I had a massive headache. I stayed awake for most of that flight. I could not get comfortable at all. So I had a bit of a headache, and once we got to the hotel, I had a good maybe 2-3 hours worth of sleep, and then we had to get up 5 hours or so later to get to practicing, because we did a martial arts seminar. Basically, I went to do a jiu-jitsu seminar mixed in with taijutsu. So jiu-jitsu is mostly the traditional format of its predecessor. Sorry, jiu-jitsu is the predecessor to judo. So it's mostly like locks, grapples, pressure points, holds, and you know, the traditional samurai grappling form of wrestling, basically. Whilst taijutsu was more focused on combat styles of. It's kind of like a mix of Kyokushin with Karate Ryu, kind of those techniques. How it's you're kind of showing the sturdiness within your stance. Like, you have a strong stance, but you can also manipulate your body into ways of being flexible, basically. So like, say if you got held into a position where, like, say if you're in a urigayaku where they hold your wrist up like this and they have you leaning down. There's one technique I used to really enjoy because I used to love my kaiten katas. A kaiten kata is basically the Japanese term for rolls, flips, and other types of things like that. So I used to do parkour an awful lot when I was younger, so this kind of came naturally to me, really. So as I went down into the urigayaku, as I was being held there, my grandmaster at the time, Soko Tanemura, was a fantastic martial artist, and he's been well versed in an awful lot of techniques, and he was well known throughout most of Japan for creating a small little community within parts of Tokyo to kind of spread the name of Genbukan. And I'll be talking about Genbukan more when I talk about my Genbukan tattoo on my back, and also some updates about that, because there have been some unfortunate changes about Genbukan that I want to address in another video, maybe when I do another tattoo story time. But for now, I just want to talk about the techniques basically that I would do there. So you would basically put your hand down when you're in an Origyaku hold, and then you would try to flip out of it. Normally I was very good with kiting katas, where if I was kneeling on the floor, I could literally just put my hands down, have my head in front of me for a placement, and then just bounce out of it. Like, I could just flip out of it like that basically. And there were times when I used to be teased for it, because I think I was the only one in the group that could do flips and stuff like that. Excuse me. And then there was a time when they just outright like stopped kiting kata rolls, which was kind of weird, because it was part of the syllabus and it was a way to help you like escape certain things. But they thought, oh well, since the majority don't know or don't bother to do it, then they just decided to get rid of it, which I really didn't agree with, because not because I was good at kiting katas and all that, because it kind of like took away from the vast majority of techniques that we use to better ourselves and to improve on one another basically, which was part of the contributing factors to what led to me leaving the Genbukan basically. Yeah, it's been 11 years. I started when I was 16, and then it ended quite recently. I've been there for about 11 years or so. I taught for about 7 of those years, and I did pretty well. I managed to get up to my first Q grade before the whole pandemic hit basically. I was kind of on my way to doing my Shodanship. Basically it's the first black belt training session. I mean, I started in teens, I got my black belt there, and then I went up to adults and then did 2 years there, and then decided to try and go for my Shodan. But unfortunately with the whole pandemic thing, it's kind of given me time to like sit back and think about my placement within Genbukan and kind of my standpoints against it really. You know, I weighed my options basically. So to talk about Japan, sorry, I didn't mean to bring it down a little bit, it's just the Genbukan was kind of like a second home to me really, and to just see the way it's going like a business. I feel like they're sacrificing the techniques and traditional cultural learnings for more business value basically, which is understandable. You need business and able to grow, but I just didn't like the way they were going with things basically, and kind of how I was treated, which I will go on to explain in a later video about, you know, my reason for departure from there. But I'll talk about the good times that I've had with them, because I've met an awful lot of lovely people at the Genbukan, especially when I went to Japan. It was the first time that I'd ever been, like, I've been in a hot tub before, but it was the first time I'd ever been to an onsen, and my god, it was gorgeous. Like, it was one of those proper onsens where, you know, we were nearby a mountain, so the heat from like the mountain itself would come down into the onsen, like the sulfur pools. We would use the sulfur pools and sit into them basically. They were so good. It stunk like a skunk really, but it was so good for the skin. Like, I remember coming out of the onsen, and I've never felt like more ash leave my body than anywhere else. And it's not just a race thing, basically, where an awful lot of African Americans say, oh, well, I'm ashy, so I need to like, put some coconut butter on me. Everyone's ashy, you just don't see it on like white skin. So like if I like raked my hand across my arm, you would see dust fly up, like if I was African American, because their skin tone kind of like makes it easier to see the ash, basically, or like the dust particles, but you can't see it on mine because of the white skin on me, basically. And I think it's because the skin is a different type of density or something like that. I feel like there's more muscle, I believe, on the African American body, and there's more skin, like there's more surface area of skin, so it's easier for like the dust to be seen because there's more surface area for it to spread out. I'm not so sure, but yeah, that's what my friend told me basically when he ever used to come round, and he's like, oh, you never have any cocoa butter. Like, why don't you ever have cocoa butter? Like, what do you mean? Like, do you need it? I was like, yeah, I get super ashy. Like, you should really like think about getting some cocoa butter. But now that I'm fully tattooed, I now realize what he means by having cocoa butter, because when I have my tattoos and they get really dry, cocoa butter is so gorgeous for the tattoos because it keeps them nice and moisturized throughout most of the day. Of course, I go back and dab a little bit on from time to time after a wash and all that, but it is so fantastic to keeping it nice and moisturized. So now, whenever I get the chance, I do moisturize from time to time on my tattoos. Not like most of my body and all that, just my tattoos basically, to give them a nice little shine. But yeah, it's the same thing with beard oil. I think I explained that already. You can use beard oil to make your tattoos shine and all that. So it's quite an interesting little hint that you can use with that, really. So to talk about the rest of Japan, that was probably the one place where I had the most peaceful sleep I think I've ever had, because I woke up at 5 in the morning and I'd never thought that I wouldn't feel tired. Like, this was the day after I had my headache from coming from Gatwick to Narita to Japan, and I was in such blissful peace, just seeing the sunrise from the far right hand side of our little hotel area as it rose over the mountain cliffs, and then there's water where the shipping lanes were coming in and out of, and there's this little beach right past this small little forest. It is a gorgeous sight to see. I went down on that beach about 4 times or so out of the visit, and I've enjoyed every single time I went down there, because they have something called iron sand, or I believe it's iron sand. It's basically just sand that's kind of greyish, so I believe it's iron sand. And I just sat in that. It was so warm. I covered my legs up in it and I just sat in the sand, just watching the sunrise and the small little sounds of the birds, the cicadas. The cicadas really gave away the peace of like the Japanese country. Really, it was such a gorgeous country. And then I also saw some sights around Tokyo, which was quite interesting. Like, there's an awful lot of sights to be seen around there. It's such a gorgeous country with gorgeous tradition. It's a gorgeous country to visit, but not so great to stay due to the whole green card system, but I'll get on that on another time. We went to go see the Emperor's Garden, I think on the last day as well, which was very beautiful. We saw a 450-year-old cherry blossom tree, I believe. I think it was 450 years old, I'm not so sure. But I believe it's older than one of the castles there. I don't know if it's in Tokyo, but I think it's near Osaka. I believe it's one of those huge little shrines, I believe, that is in Osaka. But I believe that one is only about 300 or so years old, whilst this Emperor's Garden tree, like the cherry blossom tree, was about 450 years old. Immensely thick roots at the trunk. This just shows how old it is, because of the trunk was so thick, and the branches like spread out for about I want to say about maybe 10 or 20 yards or so. This is how really big this tree was. It was very gorgeous as well. It was like right in the middle of this little lake. Oh no, it wasn't in the middle of the lake. No, the lake was on the right hand side, and on the left hand side, just nearby the side, I think that's where it was. I think it would have looked more lovely if it was like in the middle of the lake, but again, you need extra space for that thing to grow, because if it just got too big for that little island, then there's the problem of uprooting it. So I guess it would probably be best to have it on the side of the garden. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked, but yeah. So most of my time spent there was quite enjoyable, and it was actually this funny little instance that happened with Soke, my grandmaster. I was getting in the elevator to go up to the mess hall to like plan our day out, basically, because this was like everything was just about to get ready. We had some time to kill before we went to do some training, and then there was a chap who came in, who I believe I'd never really met him before, but I met him. He seemed like a lovely chap. He was the right-hand man of Soko Tanemura, who was my grandmaster, and he kind of like, he was in a hurry, and he said, oh, sorry, do you mind if I just quickly go up to the top floor? And I'm like, no, don't worry, it's fine. Anyway, I'm just talking to him, we're chatting away, we're having a laugh and all that, and then the door opens, and then sat there like a Don boss is Soko Tanemura, and he's just like there smiling away, just looking at the elevator, and I'm sat there like, and then the guy next to me just like taps me on the shoulder and he's like, "You have you have a good day, mate. Thanks for like not getting huffy with me." And I'm like, "Oh no, it's no problem." I don't know why he said that because I feel like he kind of was like playing around, but then Soccer kind of like gave him like a little look like, "What, is there like a problem or anything?" And then he just jokes back, "No, there's no problem," and all that. He's not like the type of man to be taken super seriously because he's a very he doesn't look frail. He's a very lovely gentleman, but there's something about him. There's like an aura about him where you want to take him seriously, even though he's very like happy-go-lucky. Like he seems very happy-go-lucky until like you get on the tatami mats with him, and then it turns into a whole different story basically. If I can remember like a passage from what one of Professor Kano's students said about him, she was like one of the first female British women to go to Japan to practice with Professor Kano, who I believe was one of the first judo founders. Well, he was the judo founder. He basically did what Marcus Queensberry did for the boxing glove, but with Professor Kano, he kind of added like a padded mat to judo, basically. I believe she called him very small and very frail, very small and quite old. And every time I tried to grab him and throw him, he would recover like an Indian rubber ball and then toss me like I weighed like nothing. That's kind of what you felt with Sokol. You wanted to treat him with respect because you didn't want to be on the end of what he did to you, basically. Because after he'd throw you, he kind of give you like a little tap and say, "Oh, I'm sorry. But no, he was very lovely. He was a very lovely gentleman, and I kind of just like waved at him stupidly before the doors closed, and then why the fuck did I just wave at him like that? I looked like an idiot. I looked at myself in the mirror and I'm waving at myself, smiling like a dickhead, and he's probably thinking, "What the hell was that guy's problem?" But no, he chatted with me afterwards, and he was very proud and honoured to have a student like me be there, really, to represent my dojo, basically. And I was very pleased when he said that. I was actually quite chuffed. And I had quite a good rating. I think I had like a 98 points rating out of 100, which we do when we grade each other on the seminars, basically. We go from 100 to 90. And if you go under 90, then you fail your grade, basically, which rarely ever happens. It's like if you constantly mess up and you're disrespectful, basically. Like, disrespectfulness is probably the one thing that we do not appreciate in the dojo, basically. We are always meant to be serious when we're in the dojo. We put out our personalities. We leave that outside of the dojo, but inside the dojo, it's a whole new realm. You're walking into a place of training, a place of worship, so it's obvious that you need to be respectful in all shapes and forms, basically. So we kind of got home after 4 days of hard training, which was funny because all that time I had my tattoo and I never felt a thing. It was weird. Like, it was horrible in the moment because what they do for the tattoo is they take a toothpick, well, not a toothpick, it was like a toothbrush with like a little iron point on the end of it, like a little syringe thing. They dab it in ink and then they stab it into your palm very deeply so the ink stays, and it's obvious they went deep because the ink is still strong there compared to my rose, basically, and that is one of the newer tattoos, basically. So yes, it hurt very much so, but I'm glad I got it done because I love my grandmother and I wanted to kind of show her that the pain I wanted to go through for the kindness she once showed me of giving me an angel and a lovely little card to go with it, because she writes beautifully, and I always do that with my birthday cards. I always give a lovely sentiment in my card rather than just buying a card and write, like, saying happy birthday, because it's nice to actually read something for a change when you have a birthday card. Basically, it's just nice to show that you're appreciated, basically. So for my grandmother, I love you and thank you for this very painful tattoo, but this lovely reminder that I'm your grandson. So, with that, lads and ladies, this little tattoo story time has gone on a little bit longer than I wanted, so I can only apologise for that. But yes, that is going to be it for me today, because I want to try and get this uploaded because Storm Eunice, sorry, weird freaking name, Storm Anus. The storm is finally starting to die down, so I think I might have an open window for uploading because internet speeds have been a bit weird here in England recently. Well, at least for the past 2 days because of the storm of Eunice. I'm going to call it Eunice. What a weird name to give a storm, honestly. It's just strange. We give very strange names. Like, how does that even sound female? Most storm names are female, are they not? So why call it Eunice? It's very odd. Anyway, with that, lads and ladies, I thank you ever so much for watching. The next video I'll be doing is a review of Konohana Kitan, because I'll only have 2 more mangas of that to go. I'll have the next one up maybe sometime next week, and I'll have the last one up maybe 3 weeks or so after, because I want to interchange, because I've got quite a few things coming up for you guys. So, with that, lads and ladies, I thank you ever so much for watching, and yeah, take care, my friends.